Have you ever wondered what it feels like to vanish into the wilderness and leave behind questions so strange that even decades later, no one has answers? This is not a ghost story, and it is not a piece of fiction. It is real, and it remains one of the most terrifying mysteries in modern history. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. In January of 1959, 9 experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnic Institute in the Soviet Union set out on a skiing expedition deep into the Ural Mountains. The group was led by a 23-year-old man named Igor Dyatlov. These were not amateurs. They were skilled, trained, and well-prepared. Their goal was to reach a mountain known to the local Mansi tribe as Dead Mountain. The name alone should have been a warning, but they pressed forward. On February 1st, after days of trekking through snow and ice, the hikers set up their final camp on the slope of the mountain. They pitched their tent in freezing winds, temperatures dropping below -30 degrees Celsius. It was the last time they were ever seen alive. When they failed to return as scheduled, search teams were sent into the mountains. What they found was beyond comprehension. The group's tent was discovered half buried in snow, but it wasn't simply abandoned. It had been slashed open from the inside. All of their belongings, boots, jackets, food, were still neatly placed inside. It was as though the hikers had suddenly cut their way out and fled into the night, without even taking their clothes. Why would trained mountaineers do something so reckless? Rescuers began finding bodies scattered across the snow, far from the tent. The first 2 were found near the edge of the forest, almost a mile away. They were dressed only in underwear with no shoes. Nearby, a small fire had been built, as if they had desperately tried to survive. 3 more bodies, including Igor Dyatlov himself, were discovered between the forest and the tent. It looked as though they had been crawling back toward camp, frozen in the snow. But the most disturbing discovery came weeks later when the remaining 4 were found, deeper in the woods. Their injuries defied explanation. One hiker had a fractured skull so severe it resembled the force of a car crash. 2 others had massive chest injuries, their ribs crushed inward. One woman was missing her tongue. Yet, there were no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises, nothing to suggest an attack by humans or animals. Even stranger, some of their clothes carried traces of radiation. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged. Some believe it was an avalanche, forcing the hikers to flee the tent in panic. But there were no signs of a major avalanche. Others suggest a military experiment gone wrong, that the hikers stumbled into secret Soviet weapons testing and were silenced. Some point to the Mansi people, accusing them of attacking outsiders on their sacred land. But there was no evidence of struggle. And then there are the supernatural explanations: UFOs, aliens, or even a strange infrasound phenomenon that drove the hikers into madness. But no theory explains everything. Why the tent was cut from the inside, why they left barefoot in sub-zero temperatures, why some had crushed bones without any external injuries, and why there was radiation on their clothing. The place where this tragedy occurred is now officially called Dyatlov Pass. Visitors and investigators still travel there, searching for answers, but the truth remains buried under snow and secrecy. In 2019, 60 years later, Russian authorities reopened the case, only to close it again, ruling that an avalanche caused the deaths. But experts and families remain unconvinced. Too many questions remain unanswered. Perhaps the most terrifying part of this story is not the cold, or the injuries, or even the mystery. It is the fact that 9 strong, intelligent young people, people who should have survived, died in fear, in chaos, and in ways science still cannot fully explain. And maybe, That's why the Dyatlov Pass Incident continues to haunt us, because deep down, we know that some mysteries cannot be solved, and the mountains still keep their secrets. Subscribe